You're wide awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering what's wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You're just sleeping the way almost every human being on Earth slept for most of history, before anyone told you it was supposed to look different. Here's the strange part. Sailors who spent months at sea centuries ago, taking turns on deck through the night in short shifts, weren't fighting their biology to stay alert. They were working with a pattern of sleep that modern shift workers have been quietly punished for rediscovering, often without ever being told it once had a name. For years, researchers who study the history of sleep have been piecing together old diaries, court records, and ship logs, looking for how people actually slept before electric light existed. What they found upends almost everything modern culture assumes about a normal night's rest. Before artificial lighting became common, many written accounts describe something researchers now call segmented sleep. A first sleep of several hours, a period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, and then a second sleep until morning. This wasn't insomnia. It wasn't a disorder. It was simply how a large portion of the population described falling asleep and waking up night after night for centuries. Sound familiar? It should, because that exact pattern, waking in the dead of night, lying there for a while, and eventually drifting back off, is the same experience millions of people today quietly assume is a personal failure. Here's the mechanism worth understanding. Researchers who study sleep architecture have found that the human body doesn't naturally default to one uninterrupted block of rest. Left without artificial light, in prolonged darkness, healthy adults in controlled studies have spontaneously settled into a similar two-part sleep pattern. First sleep, a waking interval, then second sleep. Hormonally, that middle waking period isn't a malfunction. Levels of a key hormone associated with relaxation actually rise during it, producing a state researchers describe as unusually calm, almost meditative, rather than the anxious, clock-watching wakefulness so many people experience today. In other words, the quiet stretch of nighttime wakefulness your ancestors expected and moved through calmly is the same stretch modern people spend anxiously checking their phones, convinced something has gone wrong. Now, think about sailors, one of the last groups forced by circumstance to keep a sleep pattern closer to this original rhythm. Ships couldn't run themselves through the night, so crews split into rotating watches, several hours on deck, several hours below, repeating in a rhythm dictated entirely by the demands of the sea rather than a single unbroken night. Sailors didn't experience this as a health crisis. It was simply the job, built around a sleep structure that historically may have been closer to how humans slept before clocks and artificial light reorganized the night into one continuous block. This is where it gets stranger. A separate line of research, this time looking at modern shift workers, found something that initially seemed contradictory. Workers who split their sleep into two deliberate segments, rather than forcing a single, unbroken block around an irregular schedule, sometimes reported better alertness and mood than those attempting one long, unified sleep crammed awkwardly around night shifts. Their bodies, when allowed to organize rest into two intentional chunks instead of fighting for one impossible block, performed measurably better on tasks requiring focus and reaction time, which suggests something almost nobody in modern shift work culture is told. The problem for many shift workers may not be that their sleep is segmented. It may be that segmented sleep, done accidentally and anxiously, without structure or acceptance, produces all the stress of fighting your own biology, while segmented sleep done deliberately, the way sailors and pre-industrial households once did it, can function as a legitimate, healthy rhythm rather than a broken one. Here's the part that should genuinely reframe how you think about your own worst nights. If waking at 3 a.m. was for most of human history simply the midpoint of a completely normal two-part night, then the anxiety millions of people feel lying awake in the dark, the racing thought that something is wrong, that they should be unconscious right now, might be a manufactured problem layered on top of an ancient, harmless pattern. The wakefulness itself isn't the malfunction. The belief that it shouldn't be happening might be. This also reframes something about artificial light itself. Cheap, Reliable lighting is a remarkably recent invention in the full span of human history. Before it, darkness stretched for far longer each night than most modern humans ever experience, leaving far more total nighttime hours available. More than enough room for 2 distinct sleep periods plus a calm, waking interval in between. Once artificial light compressed the useful nighttime hours and pushed bedtimes later, the space for that middle period simply vanished for most people, and the 2-part pattern got quietly reclassified. Not because it stopped happening, but because it no longer fit conveniently into a single, tidy 8-hour block. Let's go a layer deeper. Historians studying pre-industrial households found that the waking interval wasn't wasted time. Written accounts describe people using it for quiet, low-key activities, praying, reflecting, talking softly with a partner, tending briefly to a fire, sometimes even visiting neighbors before returning to bed. The period had a name and a cultural place. It wasn't hidden or shameful. It was expected, built into the rhythm of the night, the same way a pause is built into a piece of music, not a disruption of the melody, but part of its structure. This is almost the exact opposite of how the same experience is treated today, where waking at 3 a.m. is quietly pathologized, treated as something to fix, medicate, or panic about, rather than something to simply move through calmly, the way people did for most of recorded history. Think about the last time you woke in the middle of the night and immediately reached for your phone, heart rate climbing, already calculating how many hours of sleep you'd lost. Compare that to a sailor finishing a watch, calmly climbing into a hammock below deck, fully expecting to wake again in a few hours for the next shift, with no sense that anything unusual, broken, or alarming was happening. The sailor wasn't more disciplined than you. He simply hadn't been taught that his body was doing something wrong. And maybe that's the real answer to why you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering what's broken. Nothing is. You're not failing at sleep. You're quietly rediscovering, alone in the dark, in a culture that never told you it had a name, a rhythm humans followed comfortably for most of their existence, long before anyone decided the night was supposed to be one single, unbroken thing.